Hi, I'm Brad, and I'd like to tell you why I recently added Sony's A6000 camera to my kit. My first reason is its size. This camera is a little bit bigger than a typical point-and-shoot camera, yet it's small enough that I could comfortably carry it around with me all day. It's a great walk-around camera. The second feature about the A6000 is its familiar user interface. Like a point-and-shoot camera, it has the 3-inch LCD screen on the back, so people are very comfortable taking this camera and treating it like a cell phone or a point-and-shoot camera. I only recently became aware of how important it can be to have a familiar user interface. Recently my daughter was married. One of the people in the wedding party was a landscape architect. Their pictures were completely different from those that the professional photographer had taken. They really featured the venue, the flowers, and things of that nature. It was very interesting to see another perspective. At the same event, later in the day, a fella just happened to be in the room with the groom, his dad, and his brother. He shot what turned out to be 3 of our favorite shots from the whole day. Lauren, at the time, was shooting the girls, so she just could not be in 2 places at once. With this camera, you can hand it off to virtually anyone. They can take shots that you would miss. The third reason I selected the A6000 was its eye-level viewfinder. I've gotten a little older and my eyes aren't as sharp as they once were, so I have trouble with the LCD screens. But the eye-level viewfinder is crisp and clear. The eye-level viewfinder is positioned on the left of the body, so you bring it to your eye and you don't have a camera pressed up against your nose. It's very comfortable to use and you don't get your nose all over your LCD screen. Now, the initial reviews of this camera were really criticizing Sony. They said that the NEX6 that this camera is replacing had a 2.4 million dot viewfinder. This one has about a 1.4 million dot. Well, I've never looked through an NEX6, but this viewfinder is more than adequate for any shooting I've ever done. In fact, recent reviews say that because of the contrast difference and the different size of the pixels in this viewfinder, that the 1.4 million dot viewfinder actually does a better job than the NEX6's 2.4 million dot. I'll let you decide. The next reason I chose this camera was its manual settings. If you're an old school photographer or you just really want to select your own shutter speed and f-stop, you can set it to manual and do that. You also have shutter and aperture priority and programmed auto mode. If you want to just simply shoot in a full auto mode, there's 2 modes that you can choose from. In addition to the manual and automatic settings on the A6000, there's a feature called Scene Mode. Scene Mode programs in algorithms to give you the best camera settings for portrait, sports and action, macro, landscape, sunset, night scene, handheld twilight, night portrait, and anti-motion blur. The engineers have designed in the algorithms for camera settings that professionals would typically choose in these instances. Sometimes I just prefer to focus on my subject and composition and not worry so much about my camera settings. The 6th thing that I found appealing about this camera were the user programmable buttons. You have a C1, Custom 1, and a C2 button on the camera. If you know that you're going to want a particular setting on your camera and you don't want to have to work through the menus on the LCD screen, you can go ahead and program those buttons however you like it. Also, a number of the buttons that come from the factory set up, you can change the settings, and so you can fully customize the camera. One other great feature of this camera is the ability to shoot 11 frames per second. In the menu, you can select between high, medium, and low continuous frames. If you find yourself in a situation where you just need to spray and pray, 11 frames per second will do that nicely. That's what 11 frames per second sounds like. The same technology that allows you to shoot 11 frames per second also gives you other features. The camera will bracket your exposure. The camera will actually do composting, where it shoots multiple pictures with different camera settings and then puts them together into a single picture for you. Another reason I chose this camera was the fact that it has a 24.3 megapixel sensor. I recently did some 20 by 30 inch prints with my old camera that had a 9.6 megapixel sensor, and they turned out beautiful. I would expect that with this camera, I would be able to do really nice large prints and even crop from the images to a certain degree and still be able to make large prints. The APS-C sensor in this camera combined with the Bionz X processor give you great low light ability. Lab tests say that this camera will shoot ISO 1300 before there's any noticeable image degradation at all. I recently shot some pictures in difficult light. When I looked at the pictures, 2 of them looked like they had very little contrast. When I checked, the camera had set the ISO at 3200. There was no grain or noise in the pictures to indicate that they were shot at such a high ISO. So I simply brought them into my software, added a little contrast, a little saturation, and they looked just like the shots that had been done at ISO 100. So far, I'm very pleased with this camera's low light capabilities. Another reason for choosing this camera is just its technology in general. When the engineers at Sony designed this camera, they had a price point in mind. So obviously, there's some compromises with both the camera and its lenses. Today's technology allows our editing software and even the processor inside the cameras to correct for these shortcomings. My final reason for selecting this camera is its video capabilities. Often when shooting video, it's a stage show, it's difficult exposure. You get home and you've got this muddy, noisy video of the venue and the crowd, and then your subjects look like little stick figures that are on fire. This camera has 2 features on the video that appeal to me. The first is zebra striping. With zebra striping, I'm able to expose a shot, and then if the shot is overexposed, it'll have what look like zebra stripes all over the highlight area. You simply stop down until those zebra stripes go away, and then you can be confident that you have the correct exposure. The second video feature that appeals to me is called peaking. This camera will actually outline the subject that's in focus in your viewfinder with one of 3 colors that you select. When shooting video or in other situations where it's difficult to focus, this can be very helpful. Now the camera will only record 30 minutes of video at a time. This is not due to any internal limitation of the camera. I understand that this is based on some obscure European tax law. If somebody would develop an app that would unlock these cameras and let them record video continuously, that would be an app that I would certainly purchase. Most of the reviews have blasted the camera because it does not have a jack for an external mic input. For me, that's not a big issue. A lot of people who would use an on-camera mic with this camera would then complain that they can hear the focus motor or they could hear the zoom motor in the video. I prefer to use off-camera microphones and record into a separate digital recording device. That's just my workflow. Thanks for watching.